Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. It started as that harsh vibration on my phone, somewhere in the dark of the sleeper. For a second I thought it was just my alarm, but the tone was wrong. It had that sharp, rising warble everyone in the States recognizes now. I rolled over, smacked around for the phone, and the screen lit up my little world of curtains and rumpled bedding. Emergency alert. Local authorities advise that all evacuation orders have been canceled. Remain where you are. Do not attempt to travel. Stand by for further instructions. Below, it was a wall of capital letters from the emergency system, the kind that scroll through with all the subtlety of a fire alarm. No mention of what exactly had happened, just the same phrase repeated. Remain where you are. Do not attempt to travel. I lay there for a few seconds, listening. The freight depot was never completely quiet. Even shut down like it had been overnight, there was always something humming or clanking in the distance. A yard tractor shunting trailers, an air compressor cycling on, a train horn from the intermodal yard to the east. But right then it was almost dead still. No engines idling, no backup alarms, no roll-up doors banging. I thumbed back to the lock screen. 4:43 in the morning. Outside, I could see the faint orange glow from the high mast lights bleeding in around the sleeper curtains. My Freightliner Cascadia rocked gently on its air suspension as a gust of wind came across the lot. Remain where you are, I muttered. That's easy. I haven't gone anywhere in 18 hours. I swung my legs down, feet hitting the rubber mat. My name is Daniel Mercer, but most people on the road just call me Dan. I've been driving long haul for almost 15 years. I pull a 53-foot drive end for a Midwestern carrier, making the usual triangle between Kansas City, Denver, and Dallas, with the occasional run up to Chicago when the load planners are feeling cruel. Right now, my truck was sitting in a crowded drop lot on the west side of Kansas City, Kansas, near the big intermodal rail yard. A street address on the bill of lading said Edwardsville. It's one of those bland industrial zones you only notice if you work there. Long rows of trailers, wide asphalt, chain-link fences topped with 3 strands of barbed wire, and sodium lights that make everything look like a surveillance video. The night before, we'd been told we weren't going anywhere. Some kind of environmental incident, they said. A message from dispatch had hit my in-cab tablet around 7 the previous evening. Hold at current location. Do not proceed to interstate. Await further guidance. At almost the same time, the state DOT started pushing out alerts about full closures on I-70 and sections of I-35 and I-435. No details, just emergency conditions and infrastructure assessment. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out through the side window. Trucks were lined up in every direction. Parked nose to nose, side by side, some backed into spaces, others just angled wherever they could fit. My Cascadia was in a row with a blue Peterbilt 579 on one side and a white Volvo VNL on the other. The Peterbilt belonged to a flatbed driver named Maria. The Volvo to a reefer guy we called Big Leon, even though he never told us his last name. Orange security lights glared off windshields and chrome. I counted at least 50 tractors just in this section of the yard, probably double that if you included the other side. Almost all of them were dark, save for a few where someone had left the marker lights on. The little dispatch office at the front of the lot, a single-story prefab with plastic siding and 3 flagpoles, was dark too. I heard a door slam outside, then boots on gravel. A few seconds later, someone banged on my driver's side door. "Mercer, you awake?" That was Leon. "Yeah," I called back. My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat. Hang on. I pulled on jeans, tugged a hoodie over my t-shirt, and climbed out of the sleeper. The cold hit me when I cracked the door. November in Kansas City is unpredictable. Yesterday had been mild, in the 50s, but overnight a cold front had come through, and the air now had that sharp edge that makes diesel exhaust hang low. Leon was standing on the step of his Volvo, his breath fogging. He was a big guy even without the nickname, mid-50s, gray beard, wearing a worn ball cap from some truck show in Louisville. He held up his phone toward me. "You get one of these?" he asked. I glanced at the screen. Same emergency alert, same wording. "Yeah, just now," I said. "They cancel evacuation before they even started. That's a new one." He snorted. "My niece, down in Overland Park, said yesterday people were panicking at the grocery stores. They were talking about moving everybody east if the wind shifted. Now it's a stay put, don't drive." "Any idea what actually happened?" I asked. "They still calling it a gas leak?" "That, or a subsurface release," he said, making little air quotes. News wouldn't show anything last night. Just a map and some anchor following a script. Behind Leon, the door of the Peterbilt opened and Maria leaned out. She was mid-30s, compact, usually had a bandana tied behind her head and grease on her jeans from checking her straps and chains. She held a mug of coffee and squinted at us. "You two arguing with your phones again?" she asked. "Emergency alert," I said. "Same song, third verse, stay where you are." Maria rolled her eyes. "We've been staying where we are. Fuel's not free. Yard boss bailed at 9 last night. There's nobody in that office." She nodded toward the little building near the exit gate. Its parking spaces were empty, no sedans or pickups, just abandoned pallet jacks and a stray trash can blown over. I climbed down from the cab, boots crunching on the thin frost that had formed on the asphalt. The lot smelled faintly of diesel and cold plastic. I pulled my hoodie tighter and walked toward the front of the truck, glancing up at my rig the way I always do. It was a 2019 Freightliner Cascadia with a raised roof sleeper, Detroit DD15 under the hood, 12-speed automated manual transmission. I knew every squeak of it, every little spot of road rash on the fairings. Company colors were white with a blue stripe. Our trucks all had satellite domes on top for the company's telematics system and an electronic log tablet mounted on the dash. My current trailer was a standard 53-foot dry van, aluminum sides, roll-up door, loaded with paper goods from a mill out in central Kansas, bound for a distribution center near St. Louis, assuming the interstates ever opened again. "Any traffic on the radio?" I asked, nodding toward Leon's truck where his CB antenna stuck up like an insect's feeler. "Just drivers complaining," he said. "State channels are quiet. Somebody said the turnpike is shut down all the way from Topeka to Lawrence. My dispatcher texted that all eastbound loads are paused until further notice." "And the environmental incident is where now?" I asked. "They said west of Topeka at first," Maria said. "Then the map last night shaded half the state. Now they don't show a map at all. Just a crawl saying, avoid unnecessary travel." Behind us, a younger guy in a high-visibility jacket climbed down from a red International LT. That was Tyler, a newer driver, early 20s, 2 years in, still had the company safety manual in his door pocket. He joined our little circle, hands buried in his jacket pockets. "You guys see the video from yesterday?" he asked quietly. "What video?" I asked. "The one that got pulled," he said. My buddy sent me a screen recording before it disappeared. Some guy in a pickup on I-70 near mile marker 340 or so. He's driving, and the road ahead of him starts cracking. Like somebody grabbed the slab and yanked it down. He slams on the brakes, camera goes sideways. Last frame, you see the overpass ahead just drop, like it was made of cardboard. I frowned. Earthquake? Tyler shook his head. They said on the news there were seismic readings, but they called them shallow, localized. In the video, you can see something under the pavement. It's dark, but it's pushing the asphalt up like a wave. Then the video cuts. The link's gone now. Says removed due to violation of terms. Could be fake, Mariah said. There's always people trying to go viral when something bad happens. Tyler rubbed his face. I've seen fake videos. This looked like dashcam footage. You could see his hood, his speed, the reflection of his hands. He was doing 60, cruise control on, then he slams the brakes when the road cracks. I thought about how the truck had rocked under me a couple times during the night, like a heavy train had gone by. That wouldn't be unusual this close to the intermodal yard. The BNSF trains ran all night. But last night I hadn't heard horns or couplers clanking. Just that low, rolling vibration. Anyway, Leon said, whether it's gas underground or a quake or somebody's special effects project, they don't want anyone driving. That's the part I don't like. The not knowing? I asked. That, he said, and the fact that they shut down air traffic too. I blinked. They did what? Leon held up his phone again, showing me an app I recognized, the one that lets you see live aircraft positions. Last night around 10, there was nothing over us, he said. Commercial traffic stopped. Kansas City International, St. Louis, Wichita, all the big airports are showing ground stop. FAA put out a notice to air missions about airspace restrictions due to atmospheric conditions. No planes, I asked. Like, none? Couple of helicopters, he said. Looked like National Guard Blackhawks up north. But no airliners, no cargo. Even the UPS night flights to Louisville disappeared off the map. That sank in slow. I'd gotten used to watching the constant stream of blinking lights in the sky on late drives across Kansas. They were as much a part of the landscape as grain elevators and billboards. The idea of all those jets being told to land and stay down made my stomach feel heavy. Maria drained her coffee. So what, we're just supposed to sit in our trucks until somebody remembers us? She asked. I've got about half a tank of fuel and a case of bottled water. That's it. No idea how long we're going to be parked here. Dispatch will figure something out, Tyler said, but he didn't sound convinced. I looked back out over the lot. You didn't have to be a logistics manager to know this place wasn't set up for long-term living. There were 2 portable toilets near the entrance and a vending machine that took more of your money than it gave snacks. The little dispatch office had a coffee maker and a microwave, but that was it. Most of us had some food stashed in our cabs. Ramen, canned chili, protein bars. But it wasn't like we'd come here planning to wait out the end of the world. Another buzz came from my phone. This time it was a text from dispatch. Due to continuing emergency conditions and state federal directives, all drivers must remain at the current safe location until further notice. Do not attempt to leave in your tractor. We are working with authorities on timeline. Safety is priority. I showed it to the others. Tyler raised his eyebrows. Do not attempt to leave in your tractor, Maria read. That's specific. Leon let out a slow breath. Well, he said, I guess breakfast is whatever we have in our cupboards. We drifted back toward our trucks. I climbed into mine, shut the door, and sat there for a minute listening to the quiet. Usually at this hour, a big yard like this would be coming to life. Reefers humming, day cabs hooking up to local loads, forklifts squealing. Now, there was just wind and the occasional clatter of loose chain on someone's flatbed. I cracked my side window to get some fresh air and heard a faint rumble from somewhere deep under the asphalt. It felt like standing in an old building when a heavy train passes miles away. Not enough to move anything, just enough to make the hairs on your arms stand up. I told myself it was just a train in the intermodal yard, even though I didn't hear a horn. By mid-morning, the lot had turned into a small, restless village. People sat on their steps with coffee, talked in clusters, checked their phones over and over even though the information never changed. Cell data was getting worse. Pages took longer to load, and some news sites timed out. Social media was full of rumors and screenshots, broken highways, emergency vehicles lined up at on-ramps, hazmat suits, but everything was blurred or cropped in ways that didn't make sense. The only official statement that played on loop was a press conference from the governor. I watched it with a small group on someone's tablet, propped on a truck step. The governor stood behind a podium with the state seal, flanked by two serious-looking people in suits and a guy in a polo shirt with emergency management embroidered on it. The governor spoke calmly about a localized but significant environmental incident involving subsurface gas migration and soil instability. He repeated several times that hazardous gas levels in the air were within acceptable limits in most areas, but that, out of an abundance of caution, we are implementing temporary travel restrictions and infrastructure inspections across key transportation corridors. A reporter asked what exactly had caused the soil to move. "We are still gathering data," the governor said, barely moving his mouth. "We believe this is related to a combination of pre-existing natural gas deposits and recent heavy rainfall affecting soil saturation. Our priority is public safety. We are working closely with federal agencies." Another reporter asked about the lack of footage. "There is footage," the governor said. "However, releasing images of damaged infrastructure before we can fully assess and secure those locations could encourage people to enter unsafe areas. We're asking for patience. Please respect that we will share more when it is responsible to do so." The feed cut off when the question turned to air traffic. The video just froze, then jumped to a test pattern for a second before switching to a pre-recorded safety segment. Tyler hit refresh on the tablet, but the stream didn't come back. "Convenient," Maria muttered. "Maybe the connection dropped," Tyler said weakly. Around noon, another emergency alert hit. "Emergency alert. Travel restrictions remain in place. Do not enter interstate highways or major state routes. Remain where you are. Do not attempt to travel. Law enforcement will be conducting safety checkpoints. Follow instructions from authorities." This time, instead of everyone going quiet, the lot erupted in complaints. People cursed at their windshields, pounded their steering wheels, paced between trucks. One guy mentioned he had a medical appointment in Denver that he'd already rescheduled twice. Another had a delivery of refrigerated medications in his trailer, ice already thawing. I spent part of the afternoon inventorying what I had. In my cab, half a tank of diesel, a case and a half of bottled water, some canned soup, several packs of ramen, a tub of peanut butter crackers, a small electric kettle, and a 12-volt cooler that plugged into the accessory outlet. In the side box, basic tools, some extra fuses, a heavy-duty flashlight, road flares, a reflective triangle kit, a pair of work gloves, and a small air hose to connect to the truck's air system for topping off tires. On the dash, my CB radio tuned to channel 19. The mic had been quiet all day except for a handful of drivers swapping rumors and complaining about sitting on their hands. Around 3 in the afternoon, I walked back toward the entrance to see if anyone from the warehouse had come back. The dispatch office door was locked, the blinds drawn. A handwritten sign was taped to the glass. "Office closed until further notice. Drivers. Contact your dispatchers directly. Stay safe." I cupped my hands against the glass and looked inside. Chairs were pushed back from desks. Coffee cups sat half full next to turned-off monitors. A high-visibility vest lay on the floor like someone had dropped it on their way out. "Feels good, doesn't it?" a voice said behind me. I turned. An older man in a faded Carhartt jacket and hard hat stood a few feet away. His badge lanyard identified him as a maintenance supervisor for the distribution center across the street. "Leaving us locked out?" I asked. "Being told just to stay put without anyone in charge," he said. We shut down the picking lines when the first alerts came in. Most of my crew went home. A couple of us stayed to make sure nothing caught fire. He glanced around. "Whatever's going on out there, it isn't just a gas leak." "You've seen something?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded toward the ground. "You feel that a little while ago?" I had. We all had. Around 1, the lot had shuddered. Not a sharp jolt like quake, more like somebody had slowly rolled something heavy underneath us. A couple drivers had come out of their trucks swearing their cabinets had rattled. "I was in the warehouse when it happened," the supervisor said. "We've got polished concrete floors. You can see hairline cracks all over if you look. When that vibration hit, some of those cracks opened a hair and then closed, like the concrete flexed. Could still be a shallow quake," I said. "They happen." "Maybe," he said. "But my cousins on the fire department in Lawrence, they got called out to the turnpike this morning. A whole section of the eastbound lanes near one of the service areas dropped 2 feet. No skid marks, no collision, just dropped." "What'd they say caused it?" I asked. "They were told to list it as a subsurface instability," he said. He told me on the phone, real quiet, that the asphalt was torn from underneath. Not from the edges, not from above. Like somebody grabbed it from below and crumpled it. I thought about Tyler's erased video. "Why are they telling people not to drive?" I asked. The supervisor looked me dead in the eye. He said every time a convoy went through an affected area, something happened, he said. Single vehicles sometimes made it. More weight, more engines, more collapses. They think it's sensitive to vibration. "The gas?" I asked. He just shrugged. Your basic I can't say shrug. "All I know is my cousin's scared, and I've never heard him sound like that. And he's run into burning buildings." That night, after the sun went down and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees, I tried to sleep in the sleeper and failed. I kept waking up to small tremors, like distant thunder you feel more than hear. At one point, around 2 in the morning, I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, hands on the wheel, listening. Outside, the lot had gone quiet again. Most drivers had finally given in and gone to bed. A few still had their TV antennas up, the bluish light of screens flickering on windshield glass. Somewhere, a reefer unit chugged along, its small diesel engine cycling on and off to keep the trailer cooled. Each time that reefer engine started, I could feel a faint echo under the ground. The first couple of cycles, I told myself it was my imagination. By the third and fourth, I didn't think so. When the unit shut off and stayed off, the rumble faded. At nearly 3:30, an empty yard tractor, a day cab that belonged to the distribution center, pulled into the lot. The driver was a warehouse employee, not a road driver. He looked exhausted, eyes hollow. He backed under a loaded trailer near the exit, dropped the brakes with a hiss, and eased forward, heading toward the gate. His diesel engine was louder than any of ours, tuned more for grunt than efficiency. As he rolled past, I felt the ground respond. The truck was maybe 100 feet from me when the asphalt between us made a subtle, unnatural movement. It looked like a ripple in a thick rug when something crawls underneath. I froze. The yard tractor rumbled past the front of my truck. The driver didn't seem to notice anything. A second later, there was a louder vibration from underneath, like some giant drum had been struck below the pavement, and a network of tiny cracks appeared in the asphalt behind his tandem axles. "Hey!" I shouted before I could stop myself, flinging my door open. The driver looked over, confused. "Kill it," I yelled, waving my arms. "Shut it off." He frowned, probably thinking I was out of my mind. He rolled down his window. "What?" he called. "I can't hear you over." The rest of his sentence got swallowed by the sound of something deep under us pushing upward. The asphalt about 20 feet behind his trailer rose 3 or 4 inches, slowly, as if overpressurized. The trailer bounced, suspension squeaking. The driver looked in his mirror, eyes going wide. "Shut it down!" I yelled again. This time he hit the clutch and killed the ignition. The engine clattered to a stop. The sudden quiet was shocking. The bulge in the asphalt held for a couple of seconds, then eased back down, leaving a spiderweb of new cracks. I stood there, breathing hard, my breath turning white in front of me. The driver climbed down from his cab, boots landing carefully on the pavement. "What the—" he started, trailing off. Other doors were opening now. Maria, Leon, Tyler, and a dozen other drivers came stumbling out, looking at the ground. At the yard tractor, at me. "What happened?" Maria called. "It moved," I said. My voice sounded thin in my own ears. "The ground moved when he drove over it." "Another quake?" someone asked. "That's not how quakes work," Leon said quietly. He knelt, ran his gloved hand over one of the fresh cracks. "This is following the wheel path." We all stared at the broken section of asphalt. The cracks formed a kind of oval, directly under where the trailer's tandem axles had been a moment before. "The reefer earlier," I said. "Every time it fired up, I felt it, like something underneath us was listening." Tyler swallowed. "So it's drawn to engines." "Or weight," Mariah said. "Or both." Nobody had any good answers. One of the drivers suggested we should get off the lot and onto the street in case the whole yard gave way. Another argued that the street was worse. It was elevated in places, built on fill. Someone recommended moving our trucks farther apart so we weren't all in one cluster. "Remain where you are," Leon said bitterly. "Do not attempt to travel." We ended up doing a compromise that satisfied nobody. The yard tractor driver backed his trailer into the nearest empty slot with the engine off, using just a little momentum in the parking brake to ease it into place. After that, nobody moved any heavy equipment. We sat on edge until dawn. The next morning, the emergency alert tone hit again at 7:03. By then, we were all wide awake anyway. Emergency alert. Infrastructure impacts have expanded across multiple transportation corridors. Travel by private vehicle is strongly discouraged. Remain in place until contacted by authorities. No mention of how we were supposed to be contacted. A few minutes later, dispatch chimed in on the in-cab tablets. "All. We are suspending operations in your area. If you are at a secure facility, remain there. Local authorities will provide guidance. We cannot authorize movement at this time due to liability and safety concerns." I stared at that for a long time, feeling something harden inside me. Liability. That was what it came down to for them. Not that they didn't care if we lived or died, but they cared how it looked on a report. I thought about my sister, Lacey, down near Joplin, Missouri, with her 2 kids. She'd texted me last night that they'd heard about ground movement near the highways coming into town. Her last message before the network got spotty was, "They say we're safe for now, but we should be ready to go to a shelter if they call." I hadn't heard from her since. My family wasn't here. My life wasn't here. My truck could move if I let it, and we couldn't stay in a concrete and asphalt bowl forever while something under us tested its strength. By 8, I had made up my mind. I met Leon and Maria between our trucks. The air had that brittle cold that makes sound travel farther. We spoke in low voices anyway. I'm not staying here another night, I said. Not if the ground is doing that. Maria folded her arms. And where exactly are you going to go? She asked. The interstate's closed. State routes are closed. Law enforcement is setting up checkpoints. They'll turn you around or write you up. South, I said. Highway 71 or 69, depending on what's open. Away from the worst of whatever this is. My sister's in a ranch house built on bedrock outside Joplin. Less fill, less soft soil. If this thing is following weight and vibration, I'd rather be over solid rock than standing on a man-made parking lot over who knows what. Leon rubbed his beard. You're assuming you can get there without the road falling out from under you, he said, or troopers blocking you, or the company firing you for stealing their truck. I'm not stealing anything, I said. I'll log it. I'll tell them. I'd rather be alive and unemployed than sitting over a sinkhole for corporate. Maria didn't say anything for a moment. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't the type to be reckless, but she also wasn't the type to leave her fate entirely in someone else's hands. What about the thing reacting to engines? She asked. We saw it last night. We saw what happened when that yard tractor moved. How are you going to get out of here without drawing it right under us? We test it, I said. We move one truck at a time, lightly, keep it under 15 miles per hour, low RPM. If the ground shifts, we stop, we wait. We see how it behaves. It seemed most active when the yard tractor was pulling hard from a dead stop. That's a lot of we seem, Leon said. We're not geologists. No, I said, but we're drivers. We know how to feel what the vehicle is doing. We know how to feel road surfaces through the wheel and the seat, and we know that staying here is not a long-term plan. Tyler appeared at my elbow, joining the circle as if he'd been drawn in by the gravity of the conversation. You guys are leaving? He asked, eyes wide. I am, I said. I'm heading south. Find a small town, old roads, less traffic. They said not to, he said. They also said it was a gas leak, I replied. Does this look like a gas leak? He looked down at the cracked asphalt. I saw another video this morning before it vanished, he said quietly. A guy in a box truck outside Topeka. He was parked on a ramp. You could see his coffee shaking in the cup holder before the ramp dropped. Comments were saying the sound was like a freight train directly underneath. Then it disappeared. App said, content not available in your region. Maria exhaled slowly. If you're going, I'm not letting you roll alone, she said. Convoys may be riskier for whatever is under there, but if something happens, at least we're not by ourselves. Leon looked between us and shook his head. You kids are going to get me killed, he said, but there was no real anger in it. I told my niece I'd stay put until the all clear. You trust the all clear? I asked. He didn't answer. In the end, it was the silence from the office and the sky that made up his mind. No one was coming to coordinate us. No choppers buzzed overhead with loudspeakers. No troopers rolled in to escort us to a safer place. The authorities had drawn a big circle on a map and told people inside it to sit still. But circles on maps didn't show what the ground under your tires was doing. All right, Leon said. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. One truck moves at a time. We keep the others spread out in case the ground lets go. We avoid overpasses and elevated ramps. No heavy brakes, no jackrabbit starts, no revving like we're at a drag strip. We're going to be targets, Tyler said. If law enforcement sees us, they'll flip on the lights, pull us over. Might get ugly. Then we plan our route to stay off the main radar as much as possible, I said. We take frontage roads, county roads, anything that stays on natural ground as much as we can manage. We explain if we have to, show them what the lot is doing. Maybe we get lucky and cooperate with someone who actually cares what's happening, not just reading orders off a screen. We spent the next hour planning, huddled around a paper atlas in my cab because the digital maps kept freezing. Most people don't even know how to read a paper road atlas anymore. For truckers, it's still standard equipment. Mine was a laminated Rand McNally, corners worn, pages marked with notes and alternate routes. We traced a path with a pen. From the depot, we'd exit onto the local industrial road, then cut south to cross under the interstate instead of taking an on-ramp. From there, we'd use a series of county roads to zigzag toward US 69, avoiding major interchanges. If US 69 was blocked, we'd aim for older state routes like 169 or 71, or even drop farther east toward Missouri and take routes there. We circled spots on the map we knew sat on hills or exposed rock, places where the road was cut through limestone instead of built on fill. "Bedrock is our friend," Leon muttered. We also talked through what we absolutely had to take. "I'm not hauling that load anymore," Maria said, tapping her bill of lading. "Steel coils aren't going to help me survive out there. They'll just make the truck heavier." "I'm sitting on paper products," I said. "Not exactly survival gear either, but I'm not dropping the trailer here. We don't know if we'll find anything better, and the weight is what it is regardless." "I've got frozen chicken," Leon said. "If the reefer loses power, it's just a ticking time bomb of spoiled food, but I've also got bottled water and some dried goods in the nose compartment. Could be useful." Tyler looked miserable. "I'm just a company guy," he said. "They tell me not to drive. I don't drive. If I take this truck and something happens, I'm done." "Ty, nobody's going to fire you if they're dealing with highways turning into Swiss cheese," Maria said gently. "But you have to do what you can live with." He stared at the atlas, jaw working. "I'll think about it," he said. When it came time to actually start engines, the bravado faded for all of us. I climbed into my cab, heart pounding. My hands knew the motions by muscle memory, but every part of me was hyper-aware of the cost of each action. Parking brake set, foot on the service brake, ignition key turned until the dash lit up. Warning lights flashed, then cycled off. The electronic log tablet on the dash blinked awake. A little banner popped up. "Driver violation, do not move vehicle. Travel restrictions in place." I tapped the banner away. I wrapped my fingers around the ignition key, took a deep breath, and turned it. The whole truck vibrated in a familiar rhythm. Under normal circumstances, that sound was as comforting as a lullaby to me. I watched the mirrors. The other trucks in our little group, Maria's blue Peterbilt, Leon's white Volvo, sat silent, drivers watching. At first, nothing strange happened. The ground under my wheels felt the same as it always did when idling. Air pressure built up in the brake system, the needles on the gauges rising slowly. I waited until both read over 100 psi, then released the parking brake with a hiss. The truck rocked as the spring brakes let go. I kept my foot on the service brake for a moment, then eased off and let the truck roll forward at idle. I kept it in low gear, letting the automated transmission pick the ratio. My foot barely touched the accelerator. The Cascadia crept forward at 5, then 6 miles per hour. Beneath me, the steering wheel transmitted every little imperfection in the asphalt. I felt cracks roll under the tires, tiny bumps, patches where the pavement had settled. My eyes scanned ahead constantly for any sign of lifting or sagging. 20 feet, 30, 50. When I reached the spot where the asphalt had bulged during the yard tractor incident, I felt a faint change in resistance, like the surface underneath was less solid. My teeth buzzed in my skull, the wheel wiggled minutely. "Come on, girl," I muttered to the truck. "Just get us to the gate." I heard Leon over the CB, voice cautious. "Ground looks flat from here, no movement yet." "Copy," I said into the mic. taking it nice and easy. At about 80 feet from my original spot, I felt it. A deeper vibration, coming not from the engine but from underneath, somewhere beyond the depth of the pavement. It was low frequency, the kind you feel in your chest more than hear. The truck shuddered once, like we'd hit a hard gust of wind, even though the flags on the light poles barely moved. "You feel that?" I asked. "Yeah," Leon said. His voice sounded tighter now. "You're probably about 30 feet from where the yard tractor was." I eased off the accelerator completely. The truck slowed to a crawl. The deep vibration continued for a couple of beats, then faded. "Ground's testing you," Maria said, "like it's sniffing around." "That's one way to put it," I said through clenched teeth. The gate was now 100 or so yards ahead. Between me and it was a subtle low spot in the lot where water usually pooled after rain. The asphalt there had been patched a half-dozen times. I considered stopping and shutting down, but if I stayed in the middle of the lot, we were still in the bowl. If I got to the street, at least we'd have options. I nudged the accelerator just enough to maintain 5 miles per hour. The deep vibration returned almost immediately, stronger this time. The hood shook. I watched for any sign of the pavement bulging. At the exact center of the low spot, the steering got light, like when you hit a patch of black ice. The truck's weight shifted oddly. Ahead of me, the seam in the asphalt shivered. "Stop," Leon said in my ear. "Stop, Dan." I squeezed my foot down on the brake pedal, smooth but firm. The truck settled. The engine idled. The vibration from below grew for a second, then diminished, like whoever was pressing on the underside had given up. This time, I shut the engine off. The sudden silence was intense. I could hear the ticking of hot metal cooling, the faint whine of the cabin fan, someone coughing outside. "You okay?" Maria's voice came over the radio. "Truck's fine," I said. "Ground doesn't like me moving through the deeper fill area. At least not with power on." "So maybe it's responding to the combination of vibration and steady load," Leon said. "Like a tune it can pick up." "I can probably coast the rest of the way," I said. "It's a very slight downgrade toward the gate." "That still means rolling over that low spot," Maria said. "I'd rather roll over it with the engine off than sit on top of it," I replied. We hashed it out over the radio for a minute. In the end, I turned the key to the accessory position so my power steering wouldn't fight me, released the brake, and let the truck roll. Without engine power, there was no comforting background noise, just the whisper of tires on pavement and the squeak of the suspension. The truck crept forward at 3, then 4 miles per hour. I used the brake lightly to keep speed in check. As I rolled back into the low spot, the steering lightened again, but the deeper ground vibration was weaker. Whatever was under there didn't seem as interested without the thrum of a running engine. I coasted the rest of the way to the gate, came to a gentle stop on the slightly more solid ground near the driveway, and applied the brake. My hands were slick on the wheel. "First stage complete," I said. "Gate reached without death by pothole." Leon let out a breath he must have been holding. "All right," he said. "My turn." We repeated the process for Maria and Leon, one truck at a time. The smaller flatbed, being lighter, seemed to bother the ground less. The loaded reefer, on the other hand, made the low spot shiver enough that we all yelled at him to shut down and coast. By the time we had 3 trucks lined up nose to tail near the gate, my underarms were damp and my nerves felt like frayed wire. The maintenance supervisor from the distribution center came out while we were lining up. He stood with his hands on his hips, watching. "You're really doing this?" he called. "We can't stay here," I said, leaning out my window. "This whole lot is on fill. If it goes all at once." "You're probably not wrong," he said. "We've had settlement issues for years. You've seen the puddles? They built all this on top of old landfill and creek beds." He gestured toward the interstate beyond the chain-link fence. "But out there isn't exactly a picnic either." "We'll stick to the old roads when we can," I said. "Old farm highways. They followed the contours that were already there." He nodded slowly. "I'll tell my guys to stay near the loading docks and avoid the middle of the warehouse," he said. "You be careful." We pulled up to the gate, one at a time. The arm was in the up position. The security system had probably been turned off when the office locked its doors. No one stopped us. As my front bumper crossed the invisible line between the private lot and the city street, my phone chimed again. Another automated message from dispatch. "Driver, our records indicate vehicle movement. Do not leave your current secure facility. Call your fleet manager immediately." I thumbed the message away without reading the rest. The street in front of the depot was a standard 2-lane industrial road, concrete with expansion joints, crowned slightly for drainage, lined with warehouses. I turned right, steering carefully, keeping my speed under 10 miles per hour until we were clear of the worst of the fill. The Cascadia rolled smoothly. Through my seat I felt a subtle difference. The road here sat on older, more compacted subsurface, not the hodgepodge of scrap and dirt under the lot. "Feels better here," I said into the radio. "Still keep it slow." As we rolled past the distribution center, a few employees stood by the loading dock doors, watching with their safety vests on. One of them raised a hand. I honked my air horn, a short, subdued blast. Up ahead, the intersection with the larger arterial road loomed. The traffic light was blinking red in all directions. A 4-way stop. The cross street was usually busy with box trucks and local deliveries heading toward I-70. Now it was empty. I eased to a stop at the line, looked both ways, and then looked down at the pavement. The cross street showed scars. Long, jagged cracks cut across both lanes at a diagonal. A patch near the far curb had sunk a couple of inches, forming a shallow basin. Orange cones had been set out, then knocked over, as if someone had tried to mark the damage and given up. "See that?" Maria said. "Yeah," I said. "We're not turning left." Left would take us toward the interstate. Right would lead us toward a series of older neighborhoods and, eventually, a less direct southbound path. I turned right. We passed under an overpass a quarter-mile later. The concrete columns supporting the bridge had fresh gray patches where someone had slapped on repairs. A state trooper cruiser, blue with reflective markings, sat sideways near the base of the ramp, blocking access. Its emergency lights were off. There was no officer visible. "Eyes on the roadbed," Leon reminded us. "Any sign of movement, we stop and kill engines." We repeated that mantra at every questionable spot. When we crossed a drainage culvert, we crept. When we rolled over a manhole cover and felt a hollow thump, we flinched. For the first mile or two, the deep vibrations under us were faint. It was like we were skimming the surface of some giant animal that hadn't yet decided to react. The farther we got from the intermodal yard and the interstates, the more the ground felt like itself again. We weren't the only ones who'd decided to ignore the alerts. By the time we hit a more residential stretch, still wide, but lined with trees and a few strip malls, there were a handful of cars on the road moving cautiously. A minivan with temporary plates. A small moving truck with a mattress tied to the top. A couple with a dog in the back seat. Everyone was driving slower than usual, eyes wide, like they were expecting the asphalt to open at any second. We rolled through an intersection where the traffic lights were completely dead, the power out on 2 corners. A gas station stood empty, pumps turned off, digital price signs blank. A handwritten sign taped to the glass door said, "Closed. No power, no fuel." At that intersection, for the first time, we encountered law enforcement. A Kansas Highway Patrol Charger sat angled at the side of the road, hood open, a trooper standing in front of it with a portable radio pressed to his shoulder. He looked exhausted, hair flattened by hours under a hat. When he saw our 3 trucks approaching, he stepped out into the lane and raised his hand. "Here we go," Maria said. I braked smoothly and came to a stop a few yards in front of him. The other 2 trucks lined up behind me. The trooper walked up to my door. I rolled down the window. "Morning, officer," I said. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "Driver, you're not supposed to be out here," he said without preamble. "Did you not get the alerts?" "Yes, sir," I said. "We did. We were told to remain at our facility. The facility is built on fill-over, unstable ground. The pavement already reacted to a yard truck moving around last night. We felt safer getting off that lot and onto older roads." He squinted at me. "Pavement reacted how?" I told him about the bulge, the cracks forming under the trailer, the way the ground had seemed to follow the engine. He let out a breath that fogged in the cold. "We've been told not to talk about specifics," he said. "But, yeah, we've seen some things like that. Convoys disappearing off the turnpike. Bridge decks settling for no apparent reason. It's not just a gas issue." "So, why the stay-put orders?" I asked. "If the problem is under the roads, wouldn't you want people away from large concentrations of concrete and asphalt?" He looked like he wanted to say more, then glanced at his portable radio as if it could hear his thoughts. "Look," he said, "they're trying to avoid chaos. If everybody jumps in their car and starts driving, that's more weight, more engines, more triggers. They figure fewer vehicles means fewer collapses, but they're drawing the circle too wide. There are pockets where the ground is solid. They just don't have the bandwidth to micromanage every neighborhood. I'm trying to get to my family," I said. "Small town, older house. If I stay here, I'm sitting on top of a man-made plateau over who knows what. Out there, at least I can pick my ground." Yet he stared at me for a long moment, then looked past me at Leon and Maria's trucks. "You 3 together?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "We're keeping space between us, moving slow, engines off over known soft spots when we can." "Like you've been doing this for years," he said, managing the faintest hint of a smile. "What's your route?" I explained our plan, showing him the folded atlas on my passenger seat. He nodded slowly, tracing the line with his finger. "This stretch here," he said, pointing at a section of US 69. "We've already had 2 major incidents. Long fill over a floodplain. I wouldn't chance it, but this older state highway that parallels the river, cuts through actual rock in places, might be better." He pulled a pen from his pocket and drew an alternate route, scribbling notes in the margin. "I'm not permitted to escort you," he said. "Officially, I should order you back to your facility or to the nearest designated shelter. Unofficially," he looked up at me again. "I get it. My brother's out near Pittsburgh, same kind of situation. If I had a rig, I'd probably be doing what you're doing right now." "Is there anything we should watch for?" I asked. "Any pattern?" He hesitated, then answered. "Incidents happen most often when you've got multiple heavy vehicles clustered together," he said. "Slow-moving traffic, stop and go, idling on overpasses. We've had fewer collapses on lightly traveled farm roads, especially where the roadbed is cut into higher ground. Sound seems to matter too. We picked up some strange infrasound spikes on sensors when a freight train went through an affected area. Next thing, the track drops out from under it. So, noise and wait," I said. "Keep your RPMs low," he said. No engine brakes, no compression brakes. Coast as much as you can. Spread out. Avoid bridges built in the last couple of decades if you have older alternatives, especially over soft river bottoms. And if the ground starts to hum? He met my eyes. Stop. Shut down, now. Yes, sir, I said. And if anybody asks, he added, stepping back, I told you to report to the shelter 4 miles down this road and you took a wrong turn. He gave the side of my truck a couple of taps with his knuckles and walked back toward his cruiser. Good luck, he called over his shoulder. You too, officer, I said. We rolled on. For a while, it almost felt like a normal day on unfamiliar back roads. Traffic was light but present. A farm truck here, an SUV there, a couple of tractors out in fields, their operators pausing to watch us pass. The sky was clear, aircraft absent. Each time I looked up, I felt the wrongness of that empty blue. We followed the trooper's suggested route, cutting southeast, then south through a patchwork of small towns and farm country. The road shifted from 4-lane divided to 2-lane and back again. We drove past a water tower with a town name painted on it, a grain elevator, a Dollar General with its parking lot half full. People were clearly ignoring or negotiating the stay-put orders in their own way. The ground under the older state highways felt different. The vibrations from the truck's own weight were still there, but there was no sense of something reacting. When we drove through a cut where the road had been blasted through limestone, pale rock faces exposed on either side, I felt myself breathe easier. Feels like solid ground here, Maria said over the radio. No wonder, Leon replied. You'd need a jackhammer the size of a house to move this stuff. We skirted around a town where the main highway was blocked by barricades. A handwritten sign said, "Bridge out ahead." Locals had spray-painted "Turn back" beneath it. We stopped once at a small gas station on higher ground that still had power. Their pumps were card only, and there was a line of vehicles, but the ground under their lot had minimal cracking. I topped off my tanks, doing my best not to listen to the muttered conversations around me. One man in a faded trucker cap told another about a section of freeway near Wichita that had dropped 12 feet without warning, taking several cars with it. Another insisted it was all being blown out of proportion by media. A woman, standing by a minivan, said she had a cousin in the Army Corps of Engineers who told her off the record that they'd never seen subsurface readings like this. When someone mentioned seeing something dark moving under a collapsed section, I paid attention. Like what? I asked, as casually as I could. The woman glanced at me, then looked around as if checking for listening ears. I don't know, she said. He said when some of the slabs fell, their cameras caught a glimpse of movement down there. Not gas, not water. Something pushing through the soil like it was nothing. She shivered. He told me not to repeat that, so of course I'm out here in a gas line blabbing. Our next test came when we had to cross a river. On the atlas, the bridge we needed was marked as a standard state highway crossing. In reality, when we rolled up to it, we saw the concrete approach had cracked, one side dipping a few inches lower than the other. Orange barrels lined the shoulders. A temporary sign read 1 lane, weight restriction, follow flagger instructions, but there was no flagger in sight. I pulled to a stop before the barrels. The bridge itself was a concrete deck on piers, built in the 80s or 90s by the look of it. The river below was low, exposing muddy banks and a couple of rusted car frames. Thoughts? Maria asked. I don't like it, Leon said. I really don't. The alternate, I said, is a 30-mile detour on roads they haven't maintained in 10 years. If the bridge is still standing now, it might not be if we crawl across it in a convoy, he said. We climbed down and walked the approach on foot. Standing on the deck, I could feel a subtle vibration even with no vehicles on it. Not from underneath, from somewhere upstream. Maybe a small dam, maybe an industrial pump. What if we go one at a time? Maria suggested. First truck goes, other two wait well back. If the first makes it, second goes, and so on. Engine off over the worst, I added. Coast as much as we can. And seatbelts tight, Leon said. That was what we did. I went first this time again, partly because I knew if I didn't, someone else would, and I'd hate myself for letting them. I started on the solid ground, idled up to the beginning of the cracked section, then killed the engine and let gravity take over. The slope down to the bridge was shallow but enough to roll. As soon as the front axle crept onto the bridge deck, I felt the entire structure flex slightly, then settle. The deep vibration was there again, faint at first, then stronger. It was like something in the water was humming along with us. Halfway across, every instinct screamed at me to touch the accelerator, to speed up and get it over with. But I remembered the trooper's warning and resisted. I kept my foot hovering over the brake, ready to stop if I felt a sudden shift. The deck held. The vibration remained a background presence, not an active reaction. When my steer tires hit the far side, a rush of relief made me lightheaded. I let the truck roll up the slight incline, then ladled on a bit of brake at the crest and came to a stop on solid ground, engine still off. Bridge held, I said into the radio. My voice shook a little. Vibes, but no movement. Your call. Maria went next. Her lighter flatbed made the bridge flex less. She reported similar vibrations, but no dramatic shifts. Leon's reefer, with its heavy load and extra fuel, made the deck groan audibly. I watched intently as his trailer crossed the center. A hairline crack along the side of the deck opened a tiny fraction, then closed again. When he made it up the far slope, we all breathed out at once. The farther south we went, the more stories we picked up from people we encountered. In one gas station, a man in a mechanic's uniform described watching an entire section of suburban street slump into a trench with no rain, no warning. At a small-town diner still serving breakfast, a waitress told us about a booming sound at 2 a.m. that woke everyone up, followed by sirens as the volunteer fire department responded to a road collapse on the edge of town. No one had pictures, not because cameras weren't present, but because every time someone tried to upload or share footage, the apps glitched, the files corrupted, the posts vanished. The explanation was that bandwidth was being prioritized for official channels, but it felt targeted. Anything too clear, too revealing, just disappeared. By the time we were nearing the outskirts of Pittsburgh, my nerves were frayed. The day was wearing on. The sky had taken on a pale, washed-out look, the light diffuse. My eyes burned from scanning the road constantly. Our last major obstacle before my sister's area was a stretch of highway built on an embankment. The atlas showed it as a straight shot, elevated over low-lying farmland. I knew from previous trips that it was one of those modern upgrades, a wide, smooth road over a whole lot of engineered fill. From the moment my front tires climbed onto that embankment, I felt the difference. The road had that slightly springy feel you get on long, elevated structures. The deep vibration started almost immediately, rising in intensity as we continued. "This doesn't feel good," I said. "Ground's talking," Lahan said, louder than before. "Maybe we should get off at the next exit," Maria suggested. "There isn't one for 5 more miles," I said, staring at the GPS. "We're already on it." I slowed from 50 down to 30, then to 25. Cars around us took the hint, forming a spaced-out line behind us. A minute later, the humming grew teeth. The vibration under the truck shifted from a low thrum to a series of pulses. The steering wheel twitched in my hands. "Okay, that's enough," Leon said. "We need to get off this thing." "Working on it," I said, scanning the terrain to either side. The embankment sloped down at a shallow angle to fields. There were no cross streets, no driveways, just drainage ditches and fence lines. The humming became a steady roar, like a jet engine below us. My teeth vibrated. The mirrors blurred. Up ahead, maybe a quarter mile, I saw a change in the road texture. The asphalt had a darker strip, like a recent patch. Something about the line of the guardrails looked wrong. They dipped slightly, then rose again. "See that?" I said. "Looks like there's already been movement up there." "Then we definitely don't want to be on top of it when round 2 hits," Mariah said. In that moment, the options narrowed to 2. Stop on the embankment and shut down, or try to get off the elevated section by whatever means necessary. Stopping might reduce the attention of whatever was under there, but it would also leave us sitting ducks on a structure that was clearly under stress. Getting off meant taking a risk that any movement would make things worse. The humming rose another notch. A hairline crack skittered across the lane immediately ahead of my truck, like someone had dragged a knife through taffy. My decision made itself. "Hold on," I said into the radio. "We're leaving the road." "Excuse me," Leon said. I looked to the right. The embankment there was grass-covered, sloping down at a manageable angle. Beyond it, a harvested field, flat and brown, dotted with the stubble of last season's crops. There was a gap in the fence where a service road intersected, probably used by maintenance crews. I flipped on my right turn signal out of sheer habit, checked my mirror to make sure Maria and Leon were ready, and began easing the truck toward the shoulder. The humming spiked violently. The asphalt under my right steer tire buckled an inch, then settled. "Now, Dan," Maria shouted. I steered onto the shoulder, then over the painted line, onto the narrow strip of gravel beyond. The truck bounced, suspension complaining. I kept the angle shallow, not wanting the trailer to slide. The embankment felt steeper from the cab than it had from a distance, but the Cascadia handled the descent better than I'd feared. The anti-lock brakes clicked under my foot as I modulated pressure. For a moment, the whole world was angles. The horizon tilted, trailer slightly off-center, grain field rising to meet us. Then the steering wheel straightened, and we rolled onto the rough, uneven terrain at the base of the embankment. Behind me, in my mirror, I saw Maria's flatbed follow, dust pluming from her tires. Leon's reefer hesitated for a second longer, then committed, his trailer leaning uncomfortably before settling. As soon as we were off the engineered fill and onto compacted farm soil, the humming dropped in intensity. The tremors receded. At that exact same moment, 100 yards ahead on the elevated highway, the patch of darker asphalt sagged. It happened almost in slow motion. The right lane dipped, then the left, forming a shallow trough. The guardrail posts leaned inward. A car that had been following us slammed on its brakes. The driver's face was a pale blur behind the glass. The sag deepened into a slump. The concrete support structure beneath the asphalt failed with a muted grunt we could hear even from the field. The road surface took on a wave shape, then cracked along its length. A section about the size of a basketball court settled a couple of feet lower than the surrounding pavement, stopping at a crazy angle. Dust billowed. The car behind us swerved, tires screeching, and skidded to a stop short of the new edge. The driver threw their hands up to their head, sitting there, frozen. There were no screams, no dramatic explosions, just the stomach-turning sight of a highway behaving like an unsupported sheet of drywall. "Holy," Leon started, then caught himself. "Holy everything." We all watched for several seconds, engines idling. The only sound our own mechanical heartbeats and the faint whisper of settling debris. Nothing emerged from the void beneath the dropped slab. No creature, no gas plume, just darkness and dust. The humming subsided, as if whatever had pushed decided it had made its point. "Now, imagine if we'd been right on top of that," Maria said quietly. "This isn't random," I said. "It hit the patch, the newest, least settled part." "Which lines up with what the trooper said," Leon replied. "Old roads, old structures have held up better." We bumped our way along the edge of the field until we reached the service road at the gap in the fence, then used that to regain a lower, older county road that paralleled the highway. From there, it was a bumpy but uneventful drive the rest of the way to the turnoff near my sister's place. Her house sat a couple miles outside town on a county-maintained road that followed the ridgeline. The house itself was a one-story ranch built in the 70s, with a concrete foundation sitting directly on bedrock. The gravel driveway sloped slightly upward from the road. When I pulled my truck onto that gravel, the feeling under the tires changed completely. The vibrations from the engine had nowhere to transmit except into solid rock. For the first time since leaving the depot, the earth under me felt like it was ignoring me entirely. Lacey came out onto the porch before I even shut off the engine, kids behind her. Her face was pale and tired. When she saw the truck, she put a hand over her mouth, then ran down the steps. I killed the engine, set the brakes, and climbed down, legs suddenly unsteady. "You're insane," she said when she reached me, pulling me into a hug. "You're absolutely, completely insane." "Good to see you too," I said into her hair. Behind us, Maria and Leon parked their trucks along the shoulder, engines off. They climbed down, stretching and looking around, taking in the way the ground here was more rock than soil, the way the house sat on a slight rise. "You must be the cavalry," Lacey said when she noticed them. "Just another couple of stubborn drivers," Maria said. "We're borrowing your cousin for a while." "We can make room," Lacey said. "We have a finished basement and some extra mattresses. I don't know how long we'll have power, but the water table here is high, and we've got a manual pump. Neighbors are on similar ground. If we have to band together, we will." That first night at Lacey's, I slept in her basement, listening not for distant hums or rumbles, but for their absence. The quiet felt earned. In the days that followed, we learned more, but never enough. Official channels continued to call it an environmental event. The phrases subsurface instability, gas migration, and microseismic clusters got used a lot. Press conferences showed carefully framed shots of minor damage, small cracks in roads, a toppled retaining wall, but never the full collapses. There was no mention of anything moving under the slabs, no acknowledgement of the videos we'd briefly seen before they vanished. Air traffic remained limited. Flights resumed in some areas, heavily controlled, avoiding routes over the worst affected zones. The no-fly map looked to me suspiciously like someone had traced the paths of major interstates and rail corridors and then colored them red. From the porch, on clear nights, we could still see occasional aircraft lights far to the east or west, skirting the trouble. Over us, the sky stayed mostly empty. In our little pocket of bedrock and stubbornness, we adapted. We parked the trucks in a line along the road where the ground was thick with stone. Engines stayed off except when absolutely necessary. Fuel became precious. Each startup was a calculated risk, not just in terms of consumption but in terms of noise transmitted into the earth. Leon rigged a small generator in Lacey's detached garage, setting it on a stack of old tires to dampen vibrations and running exhaust through a makeshift muffler made from a steel drum and fiberglass. When the generator ran, the hum could barely be heard from the road. The ground, as far as we could tell, didn't react. Maria, who had done some welding as a hobby, helped reinforce the basement supports and rigged a manual hoist system for drawing water in case the pump failed. Tyler, who texted us a week later to say he'd finally left the depot with a state-sanctioned convoy, passed along whatever official guidelines he could, heavily redacted though they were. We listened to shortwave radio late at night, picking up distant voices talking about subterranean signatures and non-linear soil behavior. In some areas, people had been evacuated successfully to stadiums and school gymnasiums. In others, entire subdivisions had been declared off-limits after roads and utility corridors sank. We never saw clear footage of the worst of it, but we heard enough stories from truckers still on the road, from troopers passing through, from ham operators, to know that what we'd experienced near Kansas City wasn't an isolated thing. Sometimes, when it was quiet and the kids were asleep, I'd sit in my parked Cascadia with the ignition off, just to be in that familiar space. The cab smelled like engine oil, old coffee, and the faint chemical tang of cleaning wipes. My electronic log tablet still flashed warnings about travel restrictions and unauthorized movement. On the passenger seat, my dash cam sat idle, a little black box with a wide-angle view. I scrolled through the files I'd managed to save before some update tried to optimize my storage. There was the yard tractor incident, captured from my angle. The bulging asphalt, the panicked driver, the cracks spiderwebbing out. There was the river crossing, the bridge deck flexing just enough to make your heart stutter. There was the embankment near Pittsburgh, the slump in the road, the car that nearly went over. I'd tried uploading those clips once to a cloud folder to send them to a friend in Colorado. The upload progress bar froze at 99%, then disappeared. The folder showed up empty. No error message, just nothing. So I started doing what I know how to do best. I told the story. I sat there in the parked truck with a cheap handheld recorder I'd picked up at a drugstore in town, pressed the button, and began to talk. I talked about waking up to an emergency alert telling us to stay where we were, about a freight depot built on unstable ground, about a yard tractor shaking sleep out of us and something under the asphalt answering back. I talked about the decision to disobey, not out of recklessness but out of a need to choose which risk we were willing to live with. I talked about how the ground behaved like a listening thing, reacting to clusters of engines and weight, to steady vibrations, to our use of the infrastructure we'd built without ever really knowing what was underneath. I talked about troopers who bent the rules quietly because they understood that not every danger fit on a briefing chart. Mostly, I talked about the way the world had changed in less than 48 hours, not with fire in the sky or an obvious enemy, but with a shift in the relationship between people and the ground we took for granted. Highways were no longer neutral lines on a map. They were potential fault lines waiting for the wrong frequency. Emergency alert. Evacuation orders have been canceled. Remain where you are, the messages had said. We'd done the opposite and survived. I didn't know what the long term would look like, whether engineers would eventually figure out how to shore up the weakened corridors, whether they'd discover some new mineral deposit or gas pocket or something entirely different moving beneath us, whether the sensors would ever let the public see the full footage. What I did know was the feeling through my steering wheel when the road started to hum, and the way the ground fell quiet when I steered off the man-made embankment onto honest soil. If you're hearing this, I said into the recorder, and you're in one of those circles on the map where they tell you to stay put, don't just think about what's above you. Think about what's under you. Look at how your house is built. Look at the age of your street. If the ground's been there 100 years and hasn't moved yet, it might be the best place to ride this out. But if you're on a big parking lot or an elevated freeway feeder that didn't exist when your grandparents were kids, I paused, choosing my words carefully. Remember that these alerts were written by people looking at models and satellite feeds, not at the cracks under their own wheels. I stopped, rewound, listened back. My voice sounded tired but steady. I didn't use any dramatic language, no talk about monsters or end times, just the facts as we'd lived them. Trucks, roads, vibrations, choices, real people with real names, doing the math on the fly because the official answers weren't coming down fast enough. Later, if things calmed down and the network stopped eating inconvenient files, I'd upload the recordings. Maybe some dispatcher in another state would hear them and decide not to stack 100 trucks on a single cracked overpass. Maybe some family in a cul-de-sac built over a drained swamp would think twice about waiting for a second alert. For now, the story lived in a piece of plastic and memory. Outside, the ground was solid. I could feel it in my bones. And somewhere out there, under miles of carefully engineered pavement, something big and patient moved slower than any of us were used to thinking about time. It didn't care about our schedules, our just-in-time delivery systems, our travel advisories. It reacted when we shook it hard enough to notice. The next time my phone buzzed with an alert, I read it, noted the words, and then walked outside and looked at the soil beneath my feet. "Remain where you are," the message said. I decided carefully what that meant. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.